It's, as a matter of fact, I've been talking with this individual now off and on for, gosh, I'm going to say easily 10 years, maybe more ago. I'm saying longer, 12 years. Julia Seymour is with us this evening here on Viewpoints, and it's been a while. She's ceded the responsibility of dealing with me on Fridays to Dan Gainor years ago. But it started off when I first interviewed Julia. Then she was with MRC Business, and now she's the assistant managing editor of that department of the Media Research Center, MRC Business. And we have Julia Seymour joining us this evening. And yes, I will tell you, she's only 22. So we started talking when you were just a teenager.
Oh, I'm actually really glad I'm not 22. Those days are long gone.
Whoa, Julia. Don't you want the excitement of 22 and
no.
Or 24? Okay.
No, I am aging gracefully and thankful for the wisdom that has come with it.
Okay. Well, I am both ungraceful and not any wiser. That's the really sad part of my problem. All right. Well, with that said, it's been an interesting week, and we're going to get into a few of the highlights. But I do want to touch on the issue of CPAC, and I just touched on it briefly, that Van Jones was there, and he had some very positive things to say about conservatives, which was really a surprise. I think it caught everybody by surprise. But the other aspect of it, the whole issue of CPAC, and I know that your cohort, Dan Gainor, has been there. As a matter of fact, is on his way home from it. The question I have about CPAC, amidst all of the turmoil over the past 2 years, the challenges associated within the conservative movement, talking particularly Republicans, I'm beginning to sense that there's almost if you will, a independent movement within the Republican Party. One would have thought that CPAC might have burned out at this point, but it's not. It seems to be more popular.
That could be. Honestly, I'm stuck in the office every year. I never get to go, so I have no idea. What the tone is for those attending and present, and or what the attendance looks like year to year. But you're right. That certainly there has been concern and I think confusion on the right. Because I think we don't all feel the same way about the administration and various things. So, but I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing.
No.
That we feel differently. So, but this Van Jones thing was really something. The fact that Van Jones went to CPAC this week and gave conservatives credit for coming out and now being the leaders on criminal justice reform is really shocking, and I don't think we're going to hear it heralded by the liberal media.
Absolutely not. You can count on that. An individual, by the way, who himself has been renowned for throwing, as I like to call them, grenades. Yeah. Very explosive remarks and observations in the midst of media events. I mean, very, very radical and incendiary, and yet he was there at CPAC. The quick question, and we'll move on to a few other items because I want to talk about something that I'm sure came up as a topic at CPAC, and I, like you, have not been keeping up with a great deal of the conversation. But the thing that I'm wondering is, could this be an indication, Julia, that there is a certain degree of schism within the Democrat Party? I was reading with interest the fact that if you will, the established Democrats in Washington, D.C. are troubled, and I'm being mild, I think, pretty upset with some of the new attendees, the new arrivals, Ocasio-Cortez, for example, Rashida Tlaib, among others, that they're kind of perturbed by this. I'm wondering, is this going to pose a problem? Is there a sense that this is going to pose a problem in the coming year for the Democrats?
Well, I don't know what the sense is from the political strategy side of things, but the schism is obvious. I mean, you don't almost not a day goes by that you're not seeing, infighting on the left. Whether it's Ocasio-Cortez coming out and saying something very extreme and Nancy Pelosi poo-pooing it or being like, no, we're going to go this way over here, to some Democrats having to distance themselves from another person in their party's comments, on race or whatever. This is happening so much. Read The Hill or Politico, and you hear about it constantly.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, there was a recent closed-door conference, and apparently it was heated enough that it became public with the comments that were made. Well, let's talk about some of these issues, and one that, and of course it relates to your area of expertise, and that of course being business. And joining us this afternoon, Julia Seymour. She's assistant managing editor of the Media Research Center's business department, Business News. And Julia, one of the great issues, and we're going to get into a variety of hot topics, I think, this evening, has been the topic of socialism. And of course, we kind of touched on the topic during the general election, particularly with Bernie Sanders. Mm-hmm. But now all of a sudden, it's really heating up to the extent that, well, arguably, Bernie Sanders could be perceived as more centrist than left. And you've done an interesting story here, again, at MRC Newsbusters. Socialism, a word too honest for 93% of the nets. And this, of course, relating to the Venezuela report. So socialism is being touted, and yet you tell us about this story related to how the networks have handled this.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, obviously, what's going on in Venezuela is awful. I mean, this is a country that's now having a political fight because President Maduro continues to claim that he is the rightful leader of the socialist country. Of course, the election was anything but democratic, and that's why there's now someone, Juan Guaido, opposing him and saying, "No, I am the winner, and you need to leave." But this is not just, this is a political fight, I think, born out of desperation because of the suffering and horror that people have been living with as their country has just completely economically collapsed.
Which, by the way, let me just make a comment. At one point was the most lucrative, financially stable country in South America.
Yes, absolutely. To fall that far because of socialism. Right. And, the expats and economists say again and again and again, socialist policies were what ruined the Venezuelan economy. They're what led to hyperinflation, which means that now people, even those who have money, it's not worth anything, and they're having to dig through trash piles to eat or flee the country because they can't take care of their families. I mean, it is horrific what is going on there. And the media finally noticed something was going on in the past year. The problem is that between February 1st of last year and February 21st of this year, the evening newscasts on ABC, CBS, and NBC didn't acknowledge or use the word socialism or socialist in 93% of those stories. That is a massive failure.
Well, would you call it a massive failure or a massive success in light of the fact they did it intentionally? I think they did it intentionally.
I don't want to make I can't judge someone's motives. I can't say that this is intentional. What I can say is that I don't see how you fail to use that word.
And, of course, it's now suddenly becoming an accepted description of what's going on in Venezuela, and you juxtapose that to what is being promoted in Congress by certain members, some of the freshmen congressional, some of the freshman congresspersons. I've got to be neutral here. It is.
And Bernie Sanders, who is going to run for president again. So, yes, I think they should be admitting what's going on in Venezuela either way. But for an American audience, in a political situation that we have here in this country where there are democratic socialist people in power and people running for president of America, to refuse to say it is dishonest.
Well, as I just mentioned a moment ago, of course, it really doesn't fit the narrative. And, of course, part of this is it also is a significant contrast to what the president and his agenda has been promoting all these years, which, of course, is private enterprise, the private sector business environment, totally. So with that said, do you think that maybe this will have an influence possibly, and this is a speculation, I'm asking you to speculate on this, but might the awareness on the part of the public, and particularly the media, that socialism in and of itself is destructive, that we might start seeing a few more stories of this in relationship to what's being proposed from, again, these many new freshmen in Congress?
Sadly, what I've seen more of, and this is not necessarily from the national level media here, but further left-wing publications and websites, are people claiming, well, that's not the kind of socialism they want. Oh. So trying to put a new spin on it to distance it from what's going on in Venezuela. Yeah. But going back for just a second to the networks and how egregious it is for them to not use the word socialism or socialist. On February 18th, President Donald Trump spoke out against socialism. At the State of the Union. Connected his criticism of Nicolas Maduro in Venezuela and what's going on there to what people in this country, the democratic socialists want for this country. Specifically, he made a speech about it. And then that night, CBS Evening News used a snippet of his remarks, but focused on American protests over a border wall. And people shouting, Trump has to go. Right. And they admitted that Trump was speaking out against a Venezuelan dictator. But there was no mention of socialism or socialist. And the other networks, ABC and NBC that night, didn't mention it. They talked about the border protests. They didn't mention the speech.
It is interesting, and as we go to the break, Julia, we're now understanding that socialism can be nuanced.
But it is not. It is no less destructive. You can nuance it however you want, but it's not. It's still destructive.
Julia Seymour with us this evening. We're going to get to the good, bad, and the ugly. She's got her list as well coming up in just a few moments, and we'll get on to a few other issues. I do want to talk about the issue of abortion. As a matter of fact, there was an interesting editorial cartoon in the Raleigh News Observer that took my breath away. I'll share that with you as well. Stay with us here on Viewpoints on the Talk Station FM 107 AM 1240. Viewpoints on the Talk Station FM 107 AM 1240. It's always a pleasure to have Julia Seymour with us. She, of course, the assistant managing editor of MRC Business and the SME Research Center. And I've been chatting with her since, and I'm going back and was doing my homework, and I think it's 2007, 2008. As I said, Julia was only 12 years old when I started talking to her at that point. She's still very, very young. Julia, as always, I do appreciate this. I'm looking forward to this. I understand you've done a good, a bad, and the ugly for the week. So
sure.
With that said, let's start with the good.
Okay.
And the good?
Wolf Blitzer actually asked Bernie Sanders a hard question in the town hall this week on CNN. He asked, Senator, why have you stopped short of calling Maduro of Venezuela a dictator?
Now I'm curious. Wolf Blitzer asked that of Bernie Sanders?
He did.
Okay. But is Wolf Blitzer deciding to be a little bit more of a journalist?
I think, we're not going to go too far. He doesn't need a medal or anything. He did ask a hard question, and so we're going to give him some props this week.
All right. That's the good for the week. Let's go to the bad. And the bad?
On Meet the Press Sunday, Chuck Todd wanted to know, will Democrats regret if they don't open an impeachment investigation against Trump?
Wait a second. So he's trying to advise the Democrats that they need to open an impeachment?
To me, I hear that question and think, oh, well, you clearly want an impeachment investigation. I think that's fairly clear.
Now, this is, well, of course, I'm a little surprised by that with Chuck Todd. It could have been asked, I think, a different way.
Yeah.
Okay, so in essence, you're getting the impression that really the media is looking forward to a possibility of an impeachment investigation. Is that because it's a slow news week and they need something to really?
I don't think it was a slow news week. They were discussing the Mueller investigation and whether how that would ultimately end, and he wanted to know if Democrats would regret if they don't do this. Of course, that's an interesting question given the fact that, Tom Steyer has been promoting and spending millions of dollars telling Democrats, if you don't do it, I'm not giving you any support, and I will actively go after you. So, interesting.
This goes back to that question earlier about the schism. All right, we've got Julia Seymour. That was the good being... I'm still surprised that Wolf Blitzer asking Bernie Sanders about supporting a socialist government, and that of course, Maduro and Venezuela, and Chuck Todd a few moments ago. These are all, if you will, the same old folks that we talk about quite often. All right, now for the ugly. And our ugly is?
The Today Show this week. The hosts were thrilled to welcome feminist icon Gloria Steinem to the broadcast. Of course, promoting feminists like Gloria Steinem is no surprise for the Today Show, but they allowed her to bring up an essay she penned in 1980 comparing Adolf Hitler's views on abortion to the Republican Party platform. And basically arguing that this is still relevant.
Whoa. Back me up here. All right, we're talking Gloria Steinem, and she has written a book. This is a book was written how long ago?
She wrote an essay in 1980.
Okay.
She's out again promoting a book that's in a third edition. It had originally come out in 1983. 1983.
And in it, what does she say? What's the connection between Hitler and Republicans? One more time.
Well, the Today Show host asked, what do you want this new generation of reader to take away from your book? And she said, well, the new generation of reader is instructing me by saying that these essays are still relevant. On a more serious note, to put it mildly, is why Hitler was actually elected, and he was elected and campaigned against abortion. I mean, he padlocked family planning clinics. Okay, so that is still relevant in terms of the right wing.
But wait a second. Hitler was also a believer in eugenics.
Yes, he was. So, I think people lose when they make Nazi correlations of any kind, and yet the Today Show embraced her as she did this. So,
that is truly ugly, and of course, one would be surprised by. I'm actually not surprised by that. It's unfortunate by a long shot. All right, one of the things I want to chat with you about, and I know that there have been some articles here recently appearing in. I say articles appearing in newsbusters.org, having to do specifically with this issue of abortion. And I wanted to share with you a cartoon in the Raleigh News Observer, a McClatchy newspaper. And for those who don't see the newspaper, predominantly because they're kind of tired of the very liberal trope that it continues to spew. This is a cartoon, and it's showing a car, and at the back of the car says Democrat Party. Actually, it says Democratic Party, but I happen to believe that it's a Democrat Party. The Democrat Party. And one of the mules driving is telling the other mule that's in the passenger seat, and they're looking at an image, kind of a Grim Reaper, okay? Mm-hmm. And the driver of the car, Democrat Party, says, should we let him ride with us? And the other donkey looking out the window says, "Looks harmless to me." And the Grim Reaper has painted on its scythe infanticide.
Yeah.
And and then of course it has a little bumper sticker, which I find ironic because it's one of the items on the bumper sticker on the car. It has "Tiny lives don't matter." I find it intriguing in light of the fact that the Democrats and the liberals are so upset over the separation of children at the border when they come across, not knowing whether or not they're traveling with their true parents or possibly an imposter, and how the left is all a Twitter over the possibility of separation of these children from their parents and think this is a heinous crime, yet they have no concern whatsoever when it comes to issues such as New York and the proposal in Virginia, which, as I understand it right now, still has not passed, but other states, Vermont as well, where you can discard the baby at or very near birth. And in the case of the Senate vote Monday evening, when they basically the Democrats voted down a measure that would require doctors to provide medical assistance to babies that survive an aborted abortion. Let people think about that. Aborted abortion, an abortion that failed. Yeah. And as a result, the baby is born live. That the Senate, the U.S. Senate, Democrats refused to support a measure that would require doctors to provide medical assistance. All right, Julia, what kind of an impact is this? What are the stories like? Your organization, newsbusters.org, is covering these stories. How many are there out there that people are asking about this specifically?
Oh, goodness. I can't even I don't have a clue how many stories are out there on this. But certainly, I think this is just so tragic, and it should be shocking, but I think at this point it isn't. I think that the left has really shown themselves to want to be allowed to kill the unborn right up until the moment of them coming out of the birth canal. And this is crazy. This is, in that case, definitely infanticide. It should not be hard to say, no, we draw the line there. And yet only 3 Democrats in the Senate voted with the Republicans for the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Protection Act. And the media coverage has been atrocious, absolutely atrocious. They are portraying this bill completely as being about trying to regulate abortion or being to restrict abortion or for women's health. It is none of the above. This is about babies that survive a botched abortion. And if they do, doctors should have to save their life, or at least try to, instead of letting them die, which there has been testimony from doctors and nurses that is what happens.
This is one of those things. And what's really sad is that we're not seeing a full disclosure of this in the media. And I'm wondering, is it a perception that the media is really complicit in this? That for example, you've got a story here, Alexa Matavelis Combs, Alexa Combs. Media forgot about dead babies, focuses on Trump political framing, for example. Yeah. Is this an issue where basically the media is, I'll say complicit, not duplicit, but complicit in this?
I would say, well, you know what? I will let your listeners decide for themselves. I'm going to read some headlines.
Okay.
Think progress. Senators to cast votes on anti-abortion bill after manufactured infanticide controversy.
Whoa. In manufactured infanticide?
Yep. Manufactured infanticide controversy.
Wow. Okay.
An Associated Press story cast it as Democrats block Senate GOP anti-abortion effort. The Hill, Democrats block abortion bill in Senate.
Okay, they block an anti-abortion bill. They don't block a kill the baby bill.
Right. Or a bill to protect abortion survivors.
Right. This is important. The word choice is very, very important, Julia.
It tells you exactly what side they're on.
This is. I'm looking. Okay. You had another headline before we go to break. I'm sorry.
There are so many.
All right, I'll tell you what. Hold that thought.
Go ahead.
Hold that thought. Let's come back right after this conversation, after this break here. Julia Seymour with us this afternoon. Normally, Times Frame developed for Dan Gainor of newsbusters.org, but instead today we've got the much better looking and I would even say more pleasant Julia Seymour, and I've met her. I hate to say, yeah, you are. You brighten the room. You're much brighter. Julia Seymour, Assistant Managing Editor of MRC Business, and, of course, that with newsbusters.org here on Viewpoints this evening. Before we get back to our guest this afternoon, Julia Seymour, again, Assistant Managing Editor of newsbusters.org, MRC Business, as a matter of fact. I do want to remind you, since we are talking to somebody who knows a lot about business, and that's her area of coverage, is the business coverage and the media. I want to mention, of course, Advanced Office Solutions. And as always, to remind you, Advanced Office Solutions is committed to making the business the one that you're building, the one that you're operating, and the one that you built, not the one that government gave you. If you can find that one, let me know. But back to the issue. If you're looking to improve your business and make it great again or for the umpteenth time, do not hesitate to give the folks at Advanced Office Solutions a call. Local number 393-1112. That's 393-1112, or online at advosi.com. Integrity, reliability, and affordability. Advanced Office Solutions, a local supplier of linear products. They handle all linear service and products here in the area, and so much more. Networking solutions. They can work with you on arrangements for leasing of office equipment, any number of opportunities. That's Advanced Office Solutions, 393-1112, 393-1112, or online at advosi.com. Integrity, reliability, and affordability. Advanced Office Solutions, a local supplier of linear products. They do business with you the way you want to do business with them. We've, as I mentioned just a moment ago, have with us this afternoon Julia Seymour. Dan Gainor is returning from CPAC, and Julia, a few moments ago, was reading from us some of the, I'll use the word, egregious headlines related to the issue of, well, by the way, Julia, our audience and several of callers have suggested let's not use the word infanticide, but rather baby murder. But back to some of the headlines that you were sharing with us a few moments ago. I would like to go back to the one you just read a moment ago about the AP story. What was that again?
I would love to share it, but my computer is freaking out right now.
Oh, okay.
My screen is black.
Okay. But amidst all of this, and that's because
it's a conspiracy. Yeah,
it is a conspiracy. No question about it. This whole aspect, and I'm looking at some of them. Here we go. The Hills. Jordan Carney, Democrats block abortion bill in the Senate. We mentioned that a few moments ago. I've got this one. This is coming from Vox. A Republican-backed bill to protect abortion survivors just failed. It still matters. Mm-hmm. Okay. And then, we've got Democrats block abortion legislation in the Senate. They see this as abortion. They don't see this as a right for life, do they?
Absolutely not. They certainly do not, and I can't quote it because it's still not in front of me. But the New York Times headline basically denying.
Here we go. I've got it in front of me.
Ever happened?
Executing this coming from New York Times. Denise Grady, executing babies. Here are the facts behind Trump's misleading abortion tweet. What?
Yeah.
I think the Washington Post, Trump and Republicans are trying to paint Democrats as radical on abortion. Really? I know. And yet,
there's no paint necessary.
They
are radical on abortion.
This is some of the, again, I go back to my comment a few moments ago. The media is complicit. They're really pushing this narrative. With about, 30 seconds to go, is there any pushback in Washington, D.C., or to your point a moment ago, have we become so callous that no one sees this anymore?
Well, I mean, certainly unfortunately, when the Virginia bill was going on and Governor Northam spoke out, basically defending it, there was an outcry. And there were people like Senator Ben Sass, who's a Republican, saying, you are describing infanticide.
Right.
This is not okay. And he was, of course, co-sponsor or sponsor, I'm not sure which, of this particular
Senate bill
in the Senate. So there are people saying this is way, way, way too far. Unfortunately, there aren't enough politicians saying that. There isn't enough courage in the Senate or enough conviction that this is infanticide and it's unacceptable to pass this bill.
Julia Seymour with us this evening with newsbusters.org, where she's the I'll get it here, the assistant managing editor. Very true point on your part, Julia. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.